Good morning everyone, Richborn here, welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at another full frame lens from Viltrox. This is the AF 40mm f2.5 lens for Nikon Z. But as usual, I do expect this lens will also comes to the Sony E as well with the same optical design. Just like the Viltrox AF 20mm f2.8 lens that we have reviewed recently on this channel, the price of this lens is also very cheap at only US $158. This make it one of the cheapest autofocus full frame lens in the market. So let's have a look at the performance and design of this lens and see if this could be a good budget choice for people who don't want to spend a lot of money. Okay, let's start the review by looking at the image sharpness first. At the maximum aperture f2.5, the center sharpness is already pretty good. Stopping down the lens to f4 would improve the sharpness a little bit, but the difference is really minor. The center sharpness remains pretty much the same until we reach f11, then diffraction starting to make the image a little bit softer. Now let's have a look at the corner. At f2.5, the corner sharpness is reasonably good. I won't really call it sharp, but is very usable, at least on a 24 megapixel camera. When we stop down the lens to f4, there is some noticeable improvement in the corner sharpness. However, even if we continue to stop down the lens, the corner sharpness is still not exactly the same as the center. Focusing at the center or focusing at the corner of the frame doesn't make any difference to the corner sharpness, which suggests this lens has very minimal field curvature. With this Viltrox 40mm f2.5 lens, the minimum focus distance is 34 cm, and that will give you 0.14 times maximum magnification, which is not bad. Sharpness is alright when shooting at the minimum focus distance at f2.5. Once we stop down to f4, then the sharpness is much better, and the sharpness remains pretty much the same even if you stop down further. And we look at bokeh now, which is the out of focus area rendering. The bokeh balls quite often would have a bit of halo ring around the outside of the bokeh ball, and the shape of the bokeh ball is not always round. It's more like a D shape rather than the O shape near the corner of the photo. So this is not the lens that gives you the very smooth and round soft bokeh. I would say the bokeh from this lens has a bit of character. And let's check out the vignetting performance now. There is some very noticeable vignetting at f2.5. It is much improved when we stop down to f4. From f5.6 onwards, there is very minimal amount of vignetting. So stop down the lens a little bit if you don't want to see vignetting in your photos. Chromatic aberration control is reasonably well with this lens. While there could be a bit of color fringing in some of the really high contrast photos, the amount is quite acceptable for a budget lens, and I don't see color fringing in a lot of my photos. If you look at the local test photos, at f2.5, there is a bit of green tint behind the focus point, but it's also very minor. So overall, I think the chromatic aberration control is good enough with this lens. In terms of distortion, let's have a look at this brick wall test photo. We can see a bit of pincushion distortion near the top and bottom edge of this photo. Now, something very interesting is, if I turn off the auto distortion control feature on the Z6, I get less amount of distortion in both the JPEG and RAW file. I'm guessing there may be something not quite right with the firmware I have on this pre-production lens. Lens flare control is decent with this lens. Under most lighting situation, lens flare is quite well controlled with acceptable level of lens flare and ghosting. Contrast also seems to be pretty good, but this is also not the best Viltrox lens in terms of lens flare control. I noticed some of the more expensive Viltrox lenses would give us less amount of lens flare. With the 7 aperture braid design, This lens can render 14 points Sunstars, but you do have to stop down the lens quite a bit to see the Sunstars. If you look at this set of test photos, even at f8, I don't really get sharp Sunstars. I have to stop down further to f11 to get some Sunstars. At f16, I think the Sunstars doesn't look too bad. We'll talk about Coma now. When shooting at f2.5, if we zoom into the corner of the image, I can see some quite noticeable Coma lens aberration. Stopping down to f4, then Coma is not really noticeable. So it seems if you want to use this lens for astrophotography, you probably have to stop down to at least f4. Okay, now let's talk about the design and build quality of this lens. This lens is a pretty compact lens. I won't call it a pancake lens, but it is one of the smaller full-frame lenses with a relatively fast f2.5 maximum aperture. The lens is also very lightweight, it's approximately 180 grams. Part of the reason is because the body is mostly made of plastic. It's not a weather-sealed lens as you would expect for a budget lens. However, the lens mount is still made of metal and there is a USB-C port on the lens mount for firmware update. There's only a focus ring on the lens, there's no buttons or switches. Front filter thread is 52mm and the lens comes with a lens hood. I do find the lens hood doesn't really click or lock very securely on the lens. This is the same for all the other recent budget lenses from Viltrox like the full frame 20mm f2.8 or the APS-C 56mm f1.7 we have recently reviewed on this channel. I will really prefer a more solid click for the lens hood. So Viltrox, if you're watching it, please consider making some changes to the lens hood design. When shooting photos, the autofocus performance is very acceptable for a budget lens. Autofocus speed is okay and it is relatively quiet. You only hear a little bit of autofocus noise when shooting indoor. Eye detection works as expected. Overall, I think the autofocus works good enough and I definitely won't complain anything about it. When shooting video, autofocus is also quiet. Video continuous autofocus is a bit slow on my Z6, but it may be partially related to my camera. The focus transition is smooth and I don't notice much focus hunting or jumping at all. Last but not least, let's have a look at the focus briefing performance. When I do my 1m to 20m focus briefing test, there is virtually no focus briefing at all, which is a great news for videographer. So, we have reviewed Viltrox Autofocus 20mm f2.8 lens just a few weeks ago. This new 40mm f2.5 lens is very similar to that 20mm lens in a lot of ways. Build quality, price, size are all pretty much exactly the same. When I did the Viltrox 20mm lens review, I think that lens is a no-brainer choice for someone who wants a compact full-frame 20mm lens with autofocus and don't want to spend a lot of money. This time, with this 40mm lens, I'm not too sure if I would call it a no-brainer. It's nothing to do with the lens itself, as I think the image quality and overall design is really not bad at all for a budget lens. It's pretty much the same as the 20mm f2.8. It's just, for Nikon users at least, there is a really nice Nikon 40mm f2 lens that is also very compact and the price is under US $300. Percentage wise, the Viltrox is like half the price of the Nikon, so it sounds very attractive. But since we are talking about price that is under $300, I imagine a lot of people could easily stretch their budget from Viltrox $158 price to around $300 for the Nikon. And there are quite a few good reasons to get the Nikon. It's a first-party lens, so you definitely won't get into any compatibility issues in the future. The Nikon is also supposed to be weatherproof, even though the lens doesn't have a rubber seal on the lens mount, and it also has a slightly faster maximum aperture. But on the other hand, Viltrox has a metal lens mount while the Nikon is only plastic lens mount, and the Viltrox also comes with a front lens hood. And while the price difference is not huge, you can basically get the Viltrox 40mm lens and the 20mm lens together for the price of the Nikon 40mm lens. So it's like 2 lenses for the price of 1. Viltrox is also pretty good with their firmware update. So if there are any compatibility issues in the future, there is a very good chance that Viltrox will release firmware update to address it. If you look at it this way, then this Viltrox is actually quite attractive. But what do you guys think about this new Viltrox lens? Do you think it is another great value for money lens, or would you rather get the Nikon 40mm f2 lens instead? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts, and I would really appreciate if you can click the like button if you have watched this whole video and found it useful.